You're listening to Miss Style, Strength, and Grace with Deidra Murphy. This is your one-stop shop for style, fashion, health, and fitness. Deidra's passion is to help empower women to reach their fullest potential, both inside and out. Deidra and her guests will be discussing how to develop your style, health, and lifestyle hacks to energize your day and inspire you to keep reaching higher levels of success. Deidra is a professional fashion stylist, health guru, and Mrs. Washington 2017. It's time to get open and honest with Deidra.
Well, hello and welcome to today's episode. I am thrilled to be here to talk today about how to vintage and consignment shop or thrift shop like a boss lady. So actually last spring in 2017, I was asked to give a talk at a local credit union. Actually, they have a huge series called The Power of the Purse, and it's an 8-week long series, and every week they ask an expert in a certain field to come and give a talk, and they call it The Power of the Purse because it's all about how to be in control of, your finances, how to do things maybe on the thrifty side. So there's everything from how to cook with a budget to managing your 401k. And they asked me to do a talk on how to be a frugal fashionista. Well, that was the title I came up with, but the whole point was to come up with something and teach others how to still have style, but on a budget. This is especially huge for me because obviously, if you've listened to my journey and some of my struggles, I have battled with shopping addictions to help fill the holes in my heart. And, I've had to learn how to create new outfits and find things to mix and match and really be more successful and zoned in when I do go shopping. So one of my favorite things to do is to go consignment shopping, or, you might call it thrift shopping, vintage shopping, whatever you want to call it, especially in bigger cities. So in my town where I live, there's one particular consignment shop that I always try to hit up, and it's called Threads. She does a huge section that's not only vintage, and it's dedicated just to different eras. So she has it all laid out from 20s, 30s, up and beyond through the 90s by decade. And then she also tries to focus on higher end consignment pieces in her boutique. So everything from, current things to vintage. So I like to check out there, but I also like to bring my own things there when I'm done and I'm trying to sell it, get a little bit of money back if it's something high quality. But when I go to bigger cities, especially, I love to check out consignment stores because I can find things that are deeply discounted and trends that haven't even hit my hometown yet. So I can come back and rock those pieces and feel really, really fresh and chic. And it's something that hasn't necessarily come to my own city yet. So that's one of my favorite things to do. And for me, it's kind of one of those like fun adventures. If I go to a bigger city, I'm like, okay, I am really looking for a cool leather jacket today. And I can find maybe a piece by June Leatherwear, or maybe like Cole Haan. One of my favorite leather jackets is actually by him. I didn't find it consignment shopping. I found it at Nordstrom Rack, but finding quality leather pieces or whatever my goal is for that day. And it's kind of like the art and the find, you know what I mean? So today I wanted to share my 10 biggest vintage and consignment shopping tips that I've kind of picked up along the way, and hopefully it will empower you to be a little bit more focused when you do go shopping for vintage and or consignment pieces, because there's a lot of ways to score and find some great deals, and there's, some things to kind of stay away from. So my first tip is to go to the color sections. Most consignment stores especially will have things by color. And if they're not by color, then they're usually by style. So they might have all their jackets together, all their sweaters together, blouses, etc. And usually they will have it by color within that. So I would suggest to first look at the whites. Whites, especially when they've been taken care of, will not denature as quickly as other colors. So by denature, I mean fade. When you've had something sitting by the sunlight and you take it out of the sunlight and maybe the backside is a totally different color than the front side was. I've had that happen with when I used to work retail. We had a window and there was a blouse in the window and it was always facing the sun. I went to change the mannequin and the whole front part of the blouse was faded because it was a bright orange color, and then on the backside it was the original color, and we had to put that item on sale and try to sell it as is. I don't think it ever sold because it was ruined. So if you look at the whites, they're usually not going to fade as quickly as other colors. And especially if somebody has washed and cleaned their items and they've been well taken care of, then they're not going to show any discoloration or yellow stains. But do be careful of that. So be sure if you are checking out like the whites or the creams to check under the armpits, check for those discolorations from continual wear. But overall, white doesn't fade as quickly as other colors. So be sure to check the white sections within a vintage or consignment boutique. The next suggestion I have, so tip number 2, is to look for high quality materials. When you go to a consignment store, this is especially where you're going to find deeply discounted high-end materials. So what I mean by high-end materials is your real leather. If you're okay with wearing leather or animal products, you look for your real furs, your high-quality silks, your wools. Those fabrics not only are going to last longer, but 2, they're not going to look as dated. So a faux leather jacket, for instance, might be sitting at a consignment boutique and it might already show signs of wear, maybe around the cuffs, maybe around the collar, because it just doesn't simply last as long as real leather material will. That's why, a real leather jacket is going to be a couple $100 versus a faux leather jacket you might be able to find for, $45 to $50. It's because the real leather one is going to last longer. Especially look for the high quality materials like furs. I have found some amazing fur pieces in consignment stores, and furs are kind of one of those pieces that don't really show wear. As long as it's a real animal fur, not only is it going to be the warmest thing you can wear, especially if you live in a cold area like I do, but 2, it doesn't show age as well or as much. So for instance, a couple years ago, my husband found a vintage mink stole for me. Well, actually, I found it, told the store owner that I really liked it, and I told my husband that there may or may not be something at the store the consignment boutique that I had been eyeing, and he went and bought it for me for Christmas. But I get compliments on this thing no matter when and where I wear it, and it's great because I can put it over a coat, so I can wear it as like a really warm topper piece on top of, say, a wool jacket for that extra warmth, and it looks as good as it did the first time. I'm guessing that somebody bought it, but it's a mink kind of caramely color fur stole. That leads me into suggestion and tip number 3, and this is especially key when looking at vintage pieces like leather or furs, is to always check the linings of the garments. This is where they're going to show their wear and tear a lot of the times, because you might not see it on the outside, but as you open up the garment up, whether it's a jacket or a dress that has maybe a built-in slip or a lining, you want to check those things out and make sure that they're intact, no holes, that it's not showing extreme signs of wear. And especially for the furs, you want to make sure that the lining is intact, because that'll show that somebody actually took the time and proper care of that fur piece. I wanted to talk about my next biggest tip is number 4, and it has to do with shoes. I am a shoe gal. If you ever walk into my closet, you'll see that I have all my shoes organized by color. I love shoes. That's like my thing. If somebody was like, what's the one thing that you want to splurge on? It's shoes. But always check the bottoms and the soles of the shoes for wear. That's where you'll see whether or not somebody wore them a ton, and you might be able to get them resold. So if you are checking out a pair of shoes and everywhere on the shoe looks great, the heel is intact, the leather, doesn't show any signs of wear, but the heel is really scuffed up, it might be worth it to get the soles redone or to just get the tips redone. If the shoe looks practically brand new, then, it's worth it to get those things resold. I, for instance, found a pair of beautiful pumps and the tips just needed some fixing. The screw that keeps the heel together and the little rubber tip was worn through, but other than that, everything was fine on the shoe. And because these were such a iconic and staple shoe, I was able to get them retipped for like $30 and it made sense. Now, if the shoes were only $30 to begin with, that wouldn't have made sense. Make sure you take that into consideration as far as like cost per wear, that kind of thing. But, it definitely can be a good little thing to check and get fixed if it needs to be. My next tip, number 5, especially when vintage shopping, is to definitely mix current with vintage. So mix vintage with very modern pieces. Actually, as I record this, I'm sitting here in a midi, so that means mid-length skirt that's actually vintage. It's kind of flowy, and I'm pairing it with a really on-trend cold shoulder blouse. And again, like I didn't invest a ton in either piece, but by pairing kind of a vintage inspired skirt with a very modern top, I was able to make the whole look seem very updated and not like I just walked out of a 70s fashion magazine. I always say my number 6 tip is to always try on. So I know I've talked about this in my podcast about the biggest mistakes I see women make when they do go shopping out in the store. So always try things on, especially when vintage shopping. A lot of the times, or consignment shopping in general, a lot of the times once you buy it, it's yours. There's no returns. So if you don't have time to try it on, then I would leave it on the rack. But definitely try it on because things might be alterable. And what I mean by that is things can be taken in, but not necessarily taken out. And again, you want to consider the cost of the item versus how much it's going to cost to possibly alter it. If it's, say, a $10 skirt, it's going to cost you at least $10 or more to get it altered from a tailor. So it's not really worth it to have it taken in versus maybe a $50 skirt or dress. And you're thinking, oh, well, I could have it taken in to fit perfectly. I know my seamstress only charges about $10 to do that. Then it might be worth it to you to have that perfectly fitting dress. I know, for instance, I found a dress that was consignment, and just in my particular body shape, I always have to have things kind of altered anyway. My legs are really, really short, and my mom is a seamstress, so I get lucky that I can always go to her for my alterations. But it made sense to have the dress shortened and taken in a little bit, as I knew it was something that I would invest in and wear a ton, to both appearances as Mrs. Washington to being on stage and in a lot of big highlighted kind of events. So it made sense for me to get it altered. Now, it's not going to make sense if it's too small. There's just no way. It's not like Vera Wang where you alter yourself to fit Vera. Have you ever heard that saying? I remember on that movie Bride Wars with Kate Hudson, but she's like, you don't alter Vera to fit you, you alter yourself to fit Vera. Not true, especially when it comes to vintage and consignment shopping. If it's too small, just leave it alone. I know the temptation is to say, well, I'm going to lose 10 pounds anyway. No, biggest shopping mistake right there. My next tip, number 7, I kind of mentioned it, but thinking of alterations like cost versus value. And like I said, I kind of just briefly touched on it, but making sure that the value of the piece matches up with the cost for alterations. I know, especially just tailoring denim in particular, usually most denim is like $10 to $15 for a simple hem, or maybe simple taking it at the waistline. And you found the jeans, maybe you found a pair of Citizens of Humanity jeans that are upwards of $200 brand new, and you maybe found them for $30. It might be worth it to have them taken in if that's in your budget of thinking like, well, that's a $50 pair of jeans including alterations, then yeah, go for it. But if they're only $20 and it's going to cost just as much to get them altered, maybe not. So those are some tips when it comes to alterations. Now let's talk about some more alterations, but I like to call these at-home fixes. So tip number 8 is keep in mind what things you can possibly fix at home. With a simple thread and needle, if maybe a jacket is missing some buttons, maybe cut off all of them, find some cute replacement buttons at, say Joann's Fabric or wherever you might have as a fabric store near you, or even online, say Etsy. They have some cute handmade or custom buttons. And maybe with a little stitch and a little whip of the thread and needle, you replace all the buttons and now it looks brand new and you don't have to worry about trying to find a button to match the old buttons. I actually did that with a jacket. I found a really cute jacket and it was, only like $10, but it was by Hugo Boss and it was more of a blazer, and the buttons, one of them was missing, but I knew I had some buttons on hand that were all in a matching set. And I actually didn't even have my mom alter it. I got out my trusty needle and thread and fixed it myself. Now that's something you can even teach yourself on YouTube. I'm kind of surprised at how many, not only women, but especially young women don't have some of the simple skills when it comes to just like threading a needle. But go on YouTube, you can find videos on how to replace a button, that kind of thing. It's really pretty simple once you get the hang of it, and once you try it out, doesn't take a lot of time to learn how to do. And it's a simple life skill that can matriculate into other areas of your life. I know a lot of the times my husband's buttons on his dress shirts, especially around his neck, will sometimes fall off, and he'll save them and he's like, can you fix this? And of course, I whip out my handy dandy thread and needle and I'm like, yes, I can do it. And he's like, oh, wow, you didn't have to take it to your mom? I'm like, no, dear, I can still do simple alterations if needed. My next tip has to do with accessories. So I wanted to talk about purses. When it comes to purses or handbags especially, always check the bottom of the bags. That's where you're going to see where somebody continually set down the purse, or, maybe did they constantly hang it and like take care of it when they went to, say, a restaurant or something like that. They hung it on a hook or on a coat rack. You'll see on the bottom of the purse whether or not they were taking care of it. Do check inside the purse. A lot of the times consignment stores will actually have the original dust cover from the purse inside the bag, which is great because that shows that whoever had it was taking care of it because they kept the dust bag with it. I know I store all my bags when I'm not using them in their dust cover up in a cabinet so they don't get ruined or faded by color or anything else like that. So check the bottom of the purse, check inside for the dust cover, and definitely check the handle, especially on lighter colored materials, like even if it's leather or canvas, they will start to discolor. Just all the lotions that we as ladies use and our oils, it mixes in with the materials and it really starts to create that dingy, faded look. So be careful and leery of that. If a bag or a purse that you're looking at just looks really yellowed or discolored around the handle, I would just step away because it's just going to get worse throughout time with you using it. Those are my biggest tips when it comes to the purses and accessories. And then my last tip is to always check vintage and consignment stores in big cities. Now, I don't know where you live, but where I live, it's a little bit more limited. So when I'm in, say, Portland, Oregon or Seattle, Washington, I always check the consignment stores. Like I said, I'll find pieces that I know I've been eyeing for a while and that trend is still going strong, or maybe it's like a classic piece and I want to incorporate it back into my look and I can find it for a cheaper price than buying it brand new. My favorite find to date has actually been something I found in Paris. Now, again, I went to Paris. It's like the shopping mecca, right? But I went to Paris knowing that I was going to do some vintage and consignment shopping. And I wanted to find like the one iconic piece that I could bring back to my hometown that would last for years and not just be something like, oh, well, I like it right now, but next season I'm done with it. And I found the end all be all consignment shop in Paris. And if you want information on that, I can definitely send it to you. But I found this beautiful pair of boots by Dior, and they have just like everything about them was super classic. And I knew what their price was retail, and I knew what they were, being consignment wise. And I knew like, hey, this is something that A, nobody in my town's going to have. B, it's a little bit more fashion forward and I don't have to worry about it going out of style because it's so classic. And so I went ahead and I purchased them, and they are my favorite boots to date. But, that's up to you. Like, find something that resonates with you. But if you check out the consignment stores in bigger cities, you're going to have more options. It always amazes me when I've gone to New York City and shopped consignment in, the Big Apple. the things that women will get rid of, even if they're low cost items, say from Ann Taylor or, more of the fast fashion places like Zara and H&M to high-end Louis Vuitton pieces. It always shocks me how many things I find that still have a tag on them. They're sitting there. The person never used it because they live in such a, trendy, prevalent city like New York, or they just have more money than they know what to do with. So they buy pieces and then realize, oh, I'm over this and it's only been a month. I'm going to get rid of it. And then it's a kind of a score for women like me that have been eyeing or ogling whatever it is. And now I get to purchase it and it's practically brand new for a fraction of the original retail cost. So those are my 10 biggest tips when it comes to vintage and consignment shopping. If you have any questions or if you want tips to specific stores in some of the bigger cities from not only the West Coast, because believe me, I've probably been to them all over here, to even New York, Paris, I would love to help, guide you in some of the right directions, because there's different stores for different purposes. So there are vintage stores that are just solely based on decade pieces, to hire in consignment where they're just looking for current things that are very well taken care of. Or there's even, consignment stores that are a little bit more focused on just like current trends, but a little bit lower price point from stores like Zara or an H&M versus the higher designers. So I can definitely give you tips on that. If you would like me to help you with that, be sure to email me, Deidra@stylebydeidra.com, and I'd love to help you out. As always, I hope you have a great rest of your season, and with style and grace, I love ya.
Hey ladies, thanks for listening, and we hope you enjoyed today's episode. To help empower more women, please be a doll and rate, review, and subscribe to this podcast. For show notes and other free resources we mentioned today, go to stylebydeidra.com.